I'm here to talk about an issue that I think is central to the misconception about the housing crisis, which is design sovereignty. We have a housing crisis that is not that we need just more homes, but we need indigenous homes. And that in itself is a very profound difference between the conversations happening at the federal level and the conversations happening at the community level. Health and identity essentially are sister issues. These are not separate conditions. And part of the colonized tradition is to separate our complex interconnections of our life and separate them as separate issues so that they can be separated and treated differently and in fact dealt with differently. But the problem is, life in the everyday is that they are completely synergistic, and only community members know this more than anybody else. This is also part of the systematic issues of the housing crisis and the housing design approach that architecture has always taken within the industrial approach of supplying housing for First Nations communities, which is the fact that it is the separation of the home from the spirit and identity of the community members themselves. The idea of the home is as treated like an object that is sent as a product. And that results in a conversation with communities and community members as a question of quantity, not quality. How many bedrooms do you need? How many houses do you need? How many this, how many that? Not what kind, and what type, and how do you live? And let's listen to what you want for the future and what has your past informed about you and your life today. So for me and my research and the way I'm attempting to approach this is by trying to synergize and think about these things as connected issues. Indigenous architecture traditionally has never dealt with these as separate issues. It has always inculcated or combined the issues of lifestyle with the way the house has come to be. The material of the land became the material of the house. The maintenance of the home became a question of lifestyle and how the house is lived in by the community members and the investment that they have with it as well. So when we talk about houses, from how they used to be and how they are today, we see, of course, through so many images, as we were just hearing about from Justin, that the images we see online or the images we see when we arrive is that the homes themselves are not reflecting the qualities of the lifestyles that the community members themselves wish to live. When we talk about the housing crisis traditionally here in our academic circles or in the funding federal and governmental circles, it's always a question of problem solving. The problems of moisture leading to mold, which has a direct impact on health. Issues of overcrowding has direct issues of health related to over densities in houses like tuberculosis and communicable diseases with densities. Foundations and structural problems that we hear about. Groundwater and soil contaminations that have direct impact on the health of people drinking water, basic fundamental water. So this is the problem, is that we are talking about housing as an issue of problems, not solutions. We're not talking about it as long-term health and sources for healing and, in fact, enrichment and prosperity. So what I do with my students in the way that I'm approaching this work from our working group is that I'm going to be working with 2 architectural design studios and 1 interior design studio next year, starting from September until the springtime. And what we are doing is that we are going to the communities of Wasagamak and Garden Hill, and we're working directly with the community members, directly with the building program that Shirley was just describing. And in the past, and I've done this with Taduli Lake and Lac Brochet, is that I work with communities directly with my students to work with their students that are in these programs and the elders from the communities and the youth who want to participate. We talk about experience and talk about connections to the land. We don't look at the houses as the issue, we actually look at the lifestyle, we try to listen more than we speak. We look at the issues of what hunting means, what food security means, and how that leads to the oral histories and the narratives and the stories and the lessons that are often taught generation to generation, and how that connects to the experiences of living off of the land itself. We understand that games And social interactions are a form of communication and a way of exchange, not just within a community, but actually between communities themselves when they gather. And we look at the idea of materials and material identity as a fundamental issue that has to do with the reflection of the values of the communities who live in these homes and have always built the homes with. We look specifically to move the research towards academics helping to provoke and invite conversations around these issues, to academics letting go of the issues and letting community tell us what needs to happen and what their needs are that we can help facilitate in whatever ways possible. That's what sovereignty is about starting to pull back and make space for the community to define what their definitions of housing are, what their definitions of the needs are. And that's the challenge, because our current structures about how funding sources come in and what we propose to do are not always centered on the idea of results that we don't have control of. So that is something that I'm deeply vested to try to understand, is how we step back from the work and let the community come in and help guide us from a Southern perspective, from a non-Indigenous perspective, to guide the process forward. That's critical. And I think it's critical that we understand design as a language, something we have common ground to create a connection between the industry of housing production and the way houses been able to be produced from these communities themselves. And that has everything to do with the approach we're attempting to make now, where community members start to take control of not just the houses as designs, but houses as constructed by their own hands. Thank you very much.